My mother, without my knowledge, invited my pregnant sister and her husband to live in my house. They took over my master bedroom, so I said, "You have 24 hours, get out of here." So, let me break this down. I'm Alex, 26, and recently I did something big. I bought my own house in the city. It wasn't some tiny condo or a fixer-upper. This is a 3-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood, and it cost me close to $750,000. I used up most of my savings, but it felt right, like I was finally grounding myself. I'd been bouncing around between apartments, paying landlords crazy rents, and now I wanted to invest in something that was mine. Plus, with a solid income from my job as a software engineer, it seemed like the perfect time. I work remotely and pull in about $150,000 a year. It's good money, especially since I don't need to commute, but it means I'm in the house a lot. After settling in, I had a weird realization. The house was just too quiet. It felt empty, like this big shell I was rattling around in alone, especially when the workday ended. I wasn't expecting it, but that silence started to get to me. I'm usually an introverted guy, and I never thought I'd feel lonely, but here we are. That's when I thought of inviting my parents to live with me. Mom and Dad, Mary and Bob, are in their late 50s and were living a few towns over in a small apartment. They'd been struggling financially on and off, and this way, I figured I could help them out while filling up the space here a bit. I offered to let them move in, and I'd cover all the expenses. They'd have a place to stay, no rent, no bills, just a bit of help with groceries maybe. Seemed like a win-win. Mom was thrilled at the idea. She's always been big on family and loved the thought of us all being together. Dad was a little more hesitant, saying he didn't want to burden me, but I reassured him. I was already covering the bills, and the way I saw it, having them around would bring some life to the house. Besides, I'd set up my home office in the 2nd bedroom, and the 3rd bedroom would be perfect for them. I kept the master bedroom for myself, of course. It had an ensuite bathroom and was my own little corner of privacy, which I needed since my work sometimes meant long hours. Once they moved in, things started changing quickly. Mom immediately made herself at home, rearranging little things here and there. At first, it was just moving a vase or shifting a chair to a different corner, but soon she was putting up new curtains and adding photos all over the walls. I tried not to mind. After all, it's just decor, right? But it started feeling less like my home and more like theirs. Dad, on the other hand, kept mostly to himself. He spent a lot of time in the garden, a little hobby he had picked up years ago, and it actually looked great. Our backyard was coming alive with flowers and vegetables in no time. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, though. My mom has always been a bit opinionated, to put it nicely. She's also been known to stretch the truth now and then, and within weeks, I was feeling the tension. For instance, one morning I noticed my desk had been moved, and my work setup was messed up. I asked her about it, and she told me she'd barely touched it, but everything was out of place. I knew she tried tidying up, which just led to my keyboard and mouse being put somewhere weird, and my monitor at a strange angle. She'd always done this when I was a kid, rearranging things in my room and claiming she hadn't. I was frustrated, but I let it go. But then it got worse. I had some important documents, a mix of work stuff and personal papers, in a drawer in my office. I came home one day after a rare outing, opened the drawer, and some things were missing. My passport, for one, and a couple of work papers that I needed for a project. I confronted her about it, and she went on this long-winded explanation about how she was just organizing and didn't think I needed those things just sitting around. When I asked where they were, she got defensive and tried to brush it off as if it was no big deal. Eventually, she handed me back my passport, saying she'd kept it safe, but it felt like she was hiding something. I mean, who just takes someone's passport to keep it safe without mentioning it? Dad, meanwhile, was oblivious or just didn't want to get involved. Anytime I tried to bring up an issue, he'd nod and listen, but he'd change the subject pretty quickly. His garden projects were more interesting to him, I guess, and he avoided any conflict. I didn't blame him, but it left me dealing with my mom's antics on my own. Another day, I noticed that the bills had gone up sharply. I'm talking electricity, water, the works. I checked with my mom, and she assured me she wasn't using that much more power, but I'd see lights left on, the dishwasher running twice a day, and laundry constantly going. I tried to talk to her about it, but she brushed it off with some vague excuses, saying, "Oh, I thought you'd want the place looking nice and clean." I reminded her that I work from home and didn't need the house spotless every hour, but she just laughed it off. The final straw came with my groceries. I'd usually order groceries to be delivered every week, and I'd make a list for myself. But then food started disappearing fast. I'd find empty shelves or leftovers I had planned to eat gone, replaced by dishes Mom had cooked. Don't get me wrong, she's a great cook, but sometimes I just wanted the food I'd picked out. When I brought it up, she acted surprised, claiming she thought I didn't mind sharing or that I'd already eaten it. And somehow, I always felt like I was the one being difficult for even mentioning it. So here I am, feeling trapped in a house I bought with my own money, dealing with parents who don't quite get boundaries. I didn't think living together would be this hard. My mom's constant helping feels more like control, and my dad's distance just makes it worse. I want to talk to them, set some rules or boundaries, but I'm worried it'll just blow up. Mom's already implied that I'm being ungrateful for all she's done, even though I'm the one paying for everything. It's been a few months, and I feel more like a guest in my own house. Just when I thought I'd gotten used to Mom's ways, something even more surprising happened. One evening, as I was winding down after work, Mom casually mentioned, "Oh, by the way, Lisa and Michael are moving in for a while." Just like that. I blinked, not sure I'd heard her right. My sister, Lisa, 2 years older than me, and her husband, Michael, whom I barely knew, were coming to live with us? Before I could even process it, she went on, they need a place to stay while they're getting back on their feet. Lisa's pregnant, you know, and with everything, it's just so much easier if they're here with us. It's temporary, of course. I felt blindsided. There'd been no discussion, no mention of this possibility. No, hey, Alex, what do you think? I tried to ask her about it, to say that I would have liked to be consulted on something this big. After all, this was my house, and I was already dealing with having my parents here. But Mom brushed it off, saying, "Oh, don't be dramatic. It'll be fine. They'll be here tomorrow morning." And that was that. I felt steamrolled, like I wasn't even in control of my own home anymore. The next day, bright and early, Lisa and Michael arrived with their suitcases in tow. Lisa came in, looking as if she'd always lived here. She barely paused to say hello before she started exploring the place, commenting on this and that, and generally acting like she owned the place. Michael followed along, lugging bags and giving me a forced smile. He looked as if he'd been dragged here against his will, too, and part of me almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd suddenly become a supporting character in someone else's story. They headed straight for the spare bedroom, my home office, without even asking if it was okay. Lisa set her bag down, looked around and said, "This'll work perfectly. We just need to move your desk and computer somewhere else, Alex." I was floored. My entire workspace, my job setup, my desk, I needed all of it to work remotely and keep earning the income that was, incidentally, covering everyone's expenses. But Lisa didn't seem to care. When I pointed this out, she rolled her eyes and said, "Come on, Alex, it's not a big deal. You can work in the living room or something. We need a space for the baby, don't we?" Mom chimed in to back her up, insisting that I could make do elsewhere. When I protested, saying that I really needed a dedicated office space for my work, they just brushed me off. Michael finally stepped in, looking awkward and a bit embarrassed, and suggested they could maybe stay in the basement instead. But Mom wouldn't hear of it. No, you need a proper room. The basement isn't fit for a pregnant woman." Reluctantly, I moved my desk out of the office and into a corner of the living room, knowing that working there would be next to impossible. But what choice did I have? Every argument I raised got shut down immediately, like my concerns didn't matter. The house that I'd poured my savings into, the one that I dreamed of owning, now felt completely out of my control. It didn't take long for more issues to crop up. The first shock was the food situation. Within days, Lisa had taken over the kitchen, cooking up meals that somehow always involved ingredients I'd just bought for myself. I'd go to grab something I'd planned to make for dinner, and it'd already be gone. When I brought it up, she gave me this exasperated look, saying, "Alex, I'm eating for two now. It's not like I'm just taking it for fun." As if that explained everything. And if that wasn't enough, Lisa also had a constant stream of friends dropping by. They'd come to congratulate her on the pregnancy, bringing gifts, baby clothes, and toys. They filled up the living room, laughing and chatting loudly while I tried to work in my corner. One day, I had an important Zoom meeting, and I couldn't hear a thing over the noise. When I asked them to keep it down, Mom scolded me, saying, "Alex, be nice. Lisa's going through a special time, and her friends are just here to support her." The noise wasn't just limited to the living room. Lisa had taken to blasting music in the mornings, some kind of mood booster for the baby, she said. I'd hear pop songs and baby lullabies blaring from the office, now their bedroom, as early as 7 a.m., long before I was even awake. It didn't matter that I needed peace and quiet to concentrate on my work. I'd asked her a few times to turn it down, but she'd always give me a withering look, as if I was being unreasonable. Michael, meanwhile, was mostly quiet, but I could tell he wasn't happy either. He looked uncomfortable whenever Lisa and Mom teamed up to suggest more changes around the house. At one point, Lisa started talking about painting the nursery. My home office, my former office, now being called a nursery. She wanted a soft yellow, she said, to make it cheerful and welcoming. When I pointed out that they were only supposed to be here temporarily and that painting wasn't necessary, she looked at me with that familiar eye roll. "Oh, come on, Alex. Don't be so uptight. It's just paint. It'll make the room so much nicer for the baby. You don't want your niece or nephew to feel like they're in a prison cell, do you?" I didn't even know how to respond. This wasn't supposed to be a permanent setup, right? They'd be moving out eventually, so why all the changes? But every time I raise this point, I get the same dismissive response from Mom and Lisa, with Michael occasionally nodding along. It was as if they had already made themselves at home, and I was just the guy providing the roof. As the weeks passed, I felt my privacy slipping away completely. My master bedroom was the only place left that felt like mine, but even that wasn't safe. Lisa and Mom started leaving baby magazines and toys on my bed for inspiration. One time, I found a pair of baby shoes sitting on my pillow. "Int from Lisa," she said, since I was now an uncle-to-be. I tried telling them that my room was off-limits, but it was like talking to a wall. The utility bills shot up even more with the additional people in the house. I'd find lights left on in every room, the hot water running for what seemed like hours as Lisa took long baths for the baby's health, and the washing machine going nonstop. When I tried to discuss it with Mom, she sighed and said, "Alex, they're family. Family doesn't worry about these things. Just let it go." Let it go? I was footing the entire bill for a house full of people, all of whom seemed to think they could do whatever they wanted. I started avoiding coming out of my room when I wasn't working, just to escape the chaos. The only person I could even vaguely relate to was Michael, and he wasn't exactly stepping up to my defense. One day, I came home to find Lisa and Mom putting up a crib in the office, without asking, of course. My former desk was now squished into the corner of the living room, and the office looked nothing like the workspace I had set up. They'd put up baby wallpaper, some pastel pattern with ducks and clouds, and filled it with baby furniture. It looked like a fully decorated nursery, and I hadn't been consulted on any of it. That evening, I confronted Lisa and Mom. I asked them, as calmly as I could, when they were planning to move out. Lisa scoffed, saying, "You're being so dramatic. We're family, Alex. Family sticks together." Mom, naturally, agreed. It was like they couldn't even fathom the idea that I might want my space back. I finally asked Michael if he knew when they might be leaving, thinking maybe he'd have a more realistic answer. He looked uncomfortable, glancing at Lisa before mumbling something about a few months at most, but I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't any more certain than I was. With each day, I felt more and more like a stranger in my own home. This wasn't what I'd signed up for when I bought the house. The dream I had of owning my own space, a quiet place where I could live and work on my terms, was crumbling. Instead, I was left feeling helpless, watching as my family slowly took over every inch of the home I'd worked so hard for. Now, I'm at my breaking point. I'm not sure how to fix this without causing a massive fallout, but I know I can't keep living like this. My house, my sanctuary, has become a place where I barely have a say, and every attempt to stand up for myself is met with guilt trips and accusations of being ungrateful. Just when I thought things couldn't get more absurd, Lisa and Michael somehow managed to find a new way to push boundaries. A few weeks into their stay, Lisa started making these subtle comments about my master bedroom. She'd mention how nice the attached bathroom was or how perfect the closet space would be for a baby's things. At first, I thought she was just admiring the room. I mean, yeah, it was the best part of the house, the reason I'd chosen this place over others. But then she started bringing it up every time we passed my bedroom door. One evening, after dinner, Lisa brought it up directly. She gave me this sweet, practiced smile and said, "Alex, I was just thinking, with the baby coming, we're really going to need more space. I mean, the closet in the office is tiny, and it barely fits our things, let alone baby stuff." I knew where this was going, but I tried to play it cool. "You know there's plenty of room in the office," I replied, trying to steer the conversation back. She looked at me, undeterred. "But the master bedroom would be so much easier for us, especially since it has the private bathroom. I'd love to have that for when the baby comes, so I don't have to be running down the hall in the middle of the night." She said it as if the arrangement had already been decided, and I was just supposed to agree. Michael was sitting beside her, looking down at his plate, not saying a word. His silence was typical. It was almost like he decided to take a back seat and let Lisa and Mom do all the talking for him. And sure enough, Mom, who had been listening nearby, chimed in, "You know, Alex, it would make a lot of sense. The master bedroom is so spacious, and Lisa's going to need her own space with the baby. Think of it as you helping them start their family." That's when I lost my patience. I bought this house, and I specifically chose that room as my own. It's where I work, where I sleep, where I have my privacy. I understand Lisa and Michael need space, but they're in the guest room, which is exactly what it's meant for. The mood in the room shifted immediately. Lisa's face fell, and she looked over at Mom, her go-to backup. "Alex," she said, a forced gentleness in her tone, "it's not that we don't appreciate what you've done, but you're just one person. You don't need all that space. You're barely even in the room during the day." I could feel the frustration building. That's not the point. It's my room. I bought this place so I could finally have my own space, and I'm not giving it up. Mom sighed, looking disappointed, like I was some selfish kid who just refused to share his toys. She leaned in, her tone now exasperated. "Alex, families make sacrifices for each other. It's not just about what's fair. It's about doing what's best for everyone. You're acting like you don't even care about your niece or nephew." It took everything in me not to explode right there. Instead, I took a deep breath and repeated, "I am not giving up my room." End of story. Lisa looked hurt, offended even, as if I'd personally insulted her. "Fine, Alex," she said coldly. "We just thought you'd want to help us out. But if your space is more important than family, then we'll just manage with the cramped room." She made a dramatic show of putting her hands on her belly, as if I was the villain in some melodrama and she was the poor mother-to-be, deprived of comfort for her unborn child. Michael finally muttered, "It's okay, Lisa. We'll make it work." But he still wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked like he wanted to disappear, honestly, and I couldn't blame him. The days after that were tense, to say the least. Lisa went around the house with this wounded expression, like she was the victim of some great injustice. Mom barely spoke to me unless it was to ask something directly related to household chores. Michael kept his distance too, probably hoping he could avoid getting dragged into the drama altogether. But, as it turns out, they weren't ready to let the issue go so easily. A few days later, I noticed Mom and Lisa whispering together in the kitchen, glancing over at me whenever they thought I wasn't looking. That evening, Mom came into my room, which was rare for her these days. "Alex," she began, trying to sound calm, "I know you're stressed with work and everything going on, but maybe you could at least think about Lisa's request again? I mean, she's going to be a mother soon, and this could really help her during the first few months. You're young and resilient. You don't need as much as she does right now." I was shocked at how hard she was pushing, even after I'd made myself clear. "Mom, I already said no. It's not up for discussion." She sighed and left, but the atmosphere in the house was icy after that. Lisa continued to act like I'd betrayed her, and Mom's disappointment was more evident than ever. It was like they had all silently agreed that I was the bad guy for not giving up my space. Things came to a head one evening when I came home from a rare night out with friends. I opened my bedroom door and froze. Lisa and Mom were inside, taking measurements of the walls and closet space. I stood there in shock, watching as Lisa pointed out where they could fit a crib or a changing table, and Mom was nodding along, tape measure in hand. "What are you doing in here?" I asked, barely containing my anger. Lisa turned around, completely unfazed. "We were just seeing if the space would work for us, in case you had a change of heart. Honestly, Alex, it wouldn't kill you to be a little more open-minded about this." My patience snapped. "Get out. Now." Mom tried to step in, saying, "Alex, don't overreact. We're just planning ahead, that's all. We were hoping you'd come around eventually and—" "No," I interrupted. "You're not planning anything. You're trying to take over my room after I told you I'm not giving it up. This isn't up for negotiation." Lisa stormed out, muttering something about how selfish I was, while Mom gave me a look of pure disappointment. She didn't say another word but left with Lisa, and the silence afterward felt oppressive. The next day, I found my bed and closet stuffed with baby supplies, blankets, tiny clothes, toys. It was as if they were trying to force the idea onto me, to make me feel guilty by seeing all these things meant for a baby who wasn't even born yet. When I confronted them, Lisa claimed it was just temporary storage and that they'd move it eventually, but we both knew it was a manipulative tactic. At that point, I didn't know what to do anymore. I felt like I was being cornered in my own home, manipulated into giving up my space bit by bit. Mom and Lisa had this unspoken alliance, each backing up the other, while Michael stayed mostly silent on the sidelines. I tried talking to him one-on-one, hoping he'd be more reasonable, but he just mumbled that Lisa really had her heart set on it and that he didn't want to rock the boat. The next weekend, they made another attempt. This time, they gathered as a family in the living room: Mom, Lisa, Michael, and me. Mom started by saying that they'd all been talking and thought it would be best if I saw things from their perspective. "Alex," she said, "this isn't just about you. It's about supporting family. Lisa needs the master bedroom to be comfortable and prepared for the baby. Can't you just be understanding, just this once?" I couldn't believe they were trying this again. "Mom, I've told you 100 times. I'm not giving up my room." Lisa put on her most dramatic, pleading expression. "Alex, we're family. Don't you care about your niece or nephew? I thought you'd be excited to help us get ready for the baby." The guilt tripping was relentless, but I held my ground. "I do care, Lisa, but that doesn't mean I have to give up my personal space. I bought this house. I pay for everything here. I should at least have my own bedroom." After that, Lisa started crying, claiming I was being cruel and selfish, and Mom joined in, saying that I was tearing the family apart. Michael, ever the quiet bystander, tried to calm Lisa down, but even he shot me a disappointed look. From then on, things went from tense to openly hostile. Lisa would ignore me completely, going out of her way to make me feel like an outsider in my own home. She'd slam doors, leave the kitchen a mess after cooking, and blast her baby music even louder. Mom stopped talking to me unless absolutely necessary, treating me like I was some stranger she had to put up with. Michael kept his head down, not wanting to get caught in the middle, but clearly siding with his wife in the silent battle. Every day, I'd find more of my things moved around, subtly suggesting I should pack up and leave the master bedroom behind. My toiletries ended up in the hallway bathroom. My books were suddenly boxed up, accidentally knocked off the shelf, or reorganized to make space for baby supplies. It was like they were gradually erasing my presence from my own bedroom, hoping I'd just give up. Despite all their efforts, I held firm. The master bedroom was mine, and I wasn't giving it up, no matter how many times they tried to guilt me or wear me down. I'd worked hard to buy this house, and I wasn't going to let them take away the one place that was supposed to be mine. But I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. They were determined, and every day brought a new scheme, a new tactic, to push me out of my own space. After I refused to give up my bedroom, it was as if an invisible wall went up between me and the rest of the family. Mom, Lisa, and even Dad, who'd always been more neutral, suddenly became distant and cold. They barely acknowledged my presence, and the silent hostility was suffocating. It felt like I was in my own house, but on enemy territory. The first thing to go was mealtime. Normally, Mom would cook dinner for everyone, and we'd eat together, or at least have food prepared for later if I worked late. But right after that last showdown about the bedroom, things changed. I came out of my room one evening, expecting to see something in the kitchen, but there was nothing for me. No leftovers, no plates set aside, nothing. Instead, I found Mom, Lisa, and Michael sitting at the dining table, eating as if I didn't exist. The few times I tried to join them, they'd suddenly finish up and leave the table without a word, clearing their plates as if they'd been counting down until I walked in to make their exit. It stung, but I tried not to let it show. I just started ordering takeout or cooking something small for myself. When I opened the fridge, though, I noticed that my food would disappear as quickly as I bought it. Groceries that I paid for would vanish within a day or two, only to be replaced with Mom and Lisa's choices. Organic this, gluten-free that, baby-safe snacks that nobody would touch but Lisa. My protein shakes and snacks were buried in the back of the fridge, and sometimes I'd even find them in the trash. I tried to bring it up with them, to ask if they'd at least leave my groceries alone. But Mom cut me off, saying, "Oh, Alex, you don't even eat with us anymore. Why are you so worried about the food?" It was such an unfair response that I almost laughed. They had cut me off from family dinners without a word and were now acting as if I'd chosen to be excluded. The next blow came with the laundry. I'd gotten used to throwing my laundry in with everyone else's since we all lived together and used the same washer and dryer. But then, without warning, my clothes stopped coming back. One morning, I realized I was out of clean shirts and checked the laundry room, only to find my dirty clothes still sitting in the hamper. Meanwhile, everyone else's laundry was neatly folded on top of the dryer, and Mom had even ironed some of Lisa and Michael's clothes. When I asked Mom about it, she said bluntly, "You're a grown man, Alex. You don't need me to take care of everything for you." Fine, I thought. If they wanted to play it like that, I could handle my own laundry. I did my washing separately, but even that wasn't simple. On more than one occasion, I'd come back to the laundry room, only to find my clothes still wet, taken out of the machine and left in a crumpled heap on top of the washer while someone else's load was running. They wouldn't even wait for me to finish. Around this time, Mom began hinting at expenses. She'd mentioned how tight money was getting and how hard it was to manage everything on her own. It was bizarre, given that I was the one covering the mortgage and utilities. She'd make these offhand remarks about how it would be easier if everyone pulled their weight. One day, she even left a note on the counter that read, "Since Alex doesn't feel the need to help the family, we'll be covering expenses without him. If he changes his mind, we can talk." It was a slap in the face, like they were casting me as some ungrateful leech who wasn't contributing a dime. I was furious, but I didn't know how to respond without escalating things even further. When I tried to discuss the expenses directly with them, it was impossible. Mom and Lisa would deflect, pointing out little things I'd done wrong around the house as if to justify freezing me out. "You don't even help clean up," Lisa would say, despite me cleaning after myself and even tidying common areas when no one else bothered. Dad would stay silent, nodding along with whatever Mom or Lisa said, not willing to back me up. This freezing out wasn't limited to meals and laundry. It bled into every interaction. If I walked into a room, the conversation would die immediately. Lisa would look at me like I'd interrupted something incredibly private, and Mom would give me this tight, disapproving smile, saying nothing at all. The atmosphere was so thick with resentment that I started avoiding the common areas, retreating to my room just to have some peace. But my room wasn't safe either. I'd find little signs that they'd been in there. Things moved, drawers left open, my closet slightly ajar. One day, I came back from a quick trip to the store and noticed that my bedside drawer, where I kept some personal items and documents, was open. My passport was out, as well as a few work documents I'd kept there for safekeeping. I confronted Mom, asking if she'd been in my room, but she looked at me with this innocent expression and said, "Oh, Alex, why would I go through your things?" Another night, I walked into the kitchen and saw them talking quietly, their heads close together. When they noticed me, the conversation stopped, and they looked away. acting like they hadn't been discussing anything important. It was clear they'd been talking about me, and it happened so often that I started to feel paranoid, as if every word I said was being dissected and criticized behind my back. And then came the incident that took things from passive-aggressive to outright hostile. I'd left my laptop charging on the kitchen counter one day while I went to grab a coffee. When I returned, it was gone. I searched everywhere, starting to panic because my laptop had not only work files but also personal photos, financial documents, everything. I eventually found it in the garage, sitting on a dusty shelf, unplugged, and nearly out of battery. I was fuming. It was clear they'd moved it on purpose, probably as some twisted way of teaching me a lesson or asserting control over my belongings. When I confronted them, Mom just shrugged and said, "Well, Alex, maybe you should be more responsible with where you leave things. You're old enough to know better." Lisa nodded, adding, "You wouldn't want anything valuable to go missing, would you?" Their responses were so infuriatingly calm, like they were daring me to make a scene. I could feel my hands shaking as I took my laptop back to my room, realizing that I couldn't even trust them with my personal things anymore. They were treating me like an outsider, a stranger they could mess with whenever they felt like it. From that point on, I kept my door locked, which only worsened the atmosphere. They took it as an insult, like I was shutting them out of my life. Mom made comments about how family shouldn't need locks and how it was sad that I felt the need to hide from them. Lisa would give me these pitying looks, whispering to Michael about how stubborn and immature I was. It was ridiculous, like I was some rebellious teenager and not a grown man trying to protect my space in the house I owned. Dad, predictably, stayed out of it. He'd occasionally throw me a sympathetic look, but he never said a word to defend me. He was content to blend into the background, gardening or fixing things around the house while Mom and Lisa took over everything else. At one point, I tried to speak with him alone, hoping he'd understand my side, but he just muttered, "You know how they get, Alex. Just try to keep the peace." But keeping the peace wasn't an option anymore. Every day, there was some new way they tried to isolate me or make me feel unwelcome. One morning, I came into the kitchen to find they'd rearranged the cabinets, putting my food on the top shelves where it was hard to reach and filling the rest with Lisa's and Mom's things. I'd asked them to leave at least one shelf for me, but they'd laugh it off, saying, "Oh, Alex, just use what we have. It's all the same anyway." They even started holding family meetings without me, planning events and outings that I wasn't invited to. I'd overhear them talking about a weekend trip or a dinner out, and when I'd ask about it, they'd say, "Oh, we didn't think you'd be interested." The isolation was so intense that I began dreading leaving my room, wondering what new trick or comment would be waiting for me. It all reached a breaking point one evening when they decided to hold a family dinner in the living room. I could smell the food, something fancy they'd made together, and I knew they hadn't saved me a plate. I tried to ignore it, eating in my room, but I could hear them laughing and talking loudly, almost as if they were performing just to rub it in. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted them, telling them that I was tired of the games, the isolation, the petty little tricks. I reminded them that this was my house, and I deserved at least a baseline of respect. Mom looked at me with this icy calm, saying, "Respect goes both ways, Alex. You've made it clear that you don't care about this family's needs, so why should we care about yours?" Lisa added, "Maybe you need to think about what's really important. We're family, Alex, and you've been acting like a stranger. Maybe this house would be happier if everyone was on the same page." It was a veiled threat, but the message was clear. If I didn't fall in line and give up what they wanted, they would continue to make my life here as miserable as possible. I was exhausted, feeling trapped in my own home with people who were supposed to be family but treated me like an unwanted guest. At that moment, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could either cave to their demands or stand my ground, but either way, I knew things would never be the same. The bonds I thought I had with my family had been tested and torn, leaving me isolated and unwelcome in the very place I'd built for myself. After months of dealing with the tension, manipulation, and outright hostility, I'd finally reached my breaking point. No amount of reasoning, guilt trips, or silence could get them to understand how miserable they'd made me in my own home. The constant invasions of privacy, the sense of being unwelcome, and the endless attempts to force me into giving up my space had left me with no choice but to take drastic action. So, I did what I never thought I'd have to do with my own family. I served Lisa and Michael with eviction papers. The day after yet another cold, silent meal where I was ignored, I called everyone to the living room, and with as much calm as I could muster, I handed the notice directly to Lisa and Michael. Lisa took one look at the papers and her face turned a mix of shock and fury. "Are you serious, Alex?" she hissed, barely able to contain her anger. "You're evicting us? Your own sister, while I'm pregnant?" "Yes, I am," I said, my voice firm. "This has gone too far. I gave you a place to stay because I thought it would help you, not to be walked all over. You've ignored every boundary I set, and I can't live like this anymore." Michael, looking uncomfortable as ever, glanced from me to Lisa, then down at the floor. "Lisa," he started, but she cut him off, saying, "Don't, Michael. This is ridiculous. Alex, we're family. You don't just evict family." Mom stepped forward, shaking her head as if in disbelief. "Alex, you don't mean this. You're overreacting. Just take some time to cool down, and we'll talk about it in the morning." "No, Mom," I replied, resolute. "There's nothing more to discuss. I need my space back, and I'm tired of being treated like an outsider in my own home. Lisa and Michael have 24 hours to pack their things and leave, and if things don't change, I'll have to ask you and Dad to move out too." The room fell into stunned silence. I could see the shock on all their faces, but I held my ground, even as Mom's expression turned into something like betrayal. Lisa's outrage returned, her voice rising. "How can you do this to me, Alex? I'm pregnant, and you're just going to throw me out?" I didn't let her guilt trip me this time. "I'm doing this because you've left me no choice. I've tried everything, talking, compromising, even tolerating things I shouldn't have to, but you keep crossing the line. I need my home back, and if you can't respect that, then you need to go." Lisa stormed off, slamming the door to their room. Michael muttered a quick sorry, man, before following her, though I could tell he was just as fed up with the situation as I was. Mom and Dad stayed behind, staring at me in disbelief. "Alex," Mom began, her voice almost pleading, "you're making a mistake. Family is all we have. Don't let this drive us apart." I met her gaze. "I've tried to keep us together, but it feels like I'm the only one making sacrifices here. This is my home, Mom. I need you to understand that if you want to stay here, there have to be boundaries." She looked away, and I could tell she was trying to process everything, but I was done waiting for their understanding. I walked out of the room, feeling both exhausted and relieved, knowing I'd finally taken a step toward reclaiming my life. The next day was tense, but it went by in a whirlwind. Lisa and Michael packed up their things, moving with an air of silent fury. Lisa wouldn't even look at me, while Michael just gave me a quick nod on his way out, a silent acknowledgement of how far things had gone. I knew he'd probably been relieved to leave as much as I was to see them go. The house felt empty after they left, but in a good way. It was as if a weight had been lifted. For the first time in months, I could walk through my own home without feeling the need to tiptoe around my own family. The silence was peaceful, not oppressive, and I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm that I hadn't felt in ages. Mom and Dad were still in the house, though, and there was a lingering tension between us. They kept mostly to themselves over the next few days, and I noticed that Mom had finally stopped with the silent treatment. She seemed thoughtful, reflective even, and I hoped that maybe, just maybe, she'd started to see things from my perspective. One evening, a few days after Lisa and Michael had left, Mom came into the living room and sat down beside me. I could tell from the look on her face that she wanted to talk. She looked at me, her eyes softer than they had been in months, and said, "Alex, I want to apologize." Her words caught me off guard. I hadn't expected an apology, especially after everything that had happened. I stayed silent, letting her continue. "We've been unfair to you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You opened your home to us, and instead of being grateful, we pushed and pushed until you had no choice but to push back. I see that now, and I'm so sorry. I was just so focused on helping Lisa that I didn't realize how much it was hurting you." I felt a lump in my throat, hearing the sincerity in her voice. It was something I'd been waiting to hear for so long, and finally, it was happening. I nodded, trying to keep my own emotions in check. I wanted to help, Mom. I really did. But it felt like no matter what I did, it was never enough. I was always the one expected to sacrifice, to make room, to give up what I'd worked for. And it hurt that nobody seemed to see that. She reached out and took my hand, something she hadn't done in ages. You're right. We underestimated how much you've done for us. You're more than generous, Alex, and I don't want to lose that because I couldn't respect your boundaries. I promise things will be different from now on. Hearing her say that brought a wave of relief over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this. Like maybe, finally, I had my family's respect. I squeezed her hand and gave her a small smile. Thank you, Mom. That means a lot. She nodded, wiping away a tear. You've done so much for us, Alex. I just hope we can make it up to you.